Oh, buddy, Andy here again. Well, today is one of those days that makes you start to realise that you're actually getting on a little bit, because today it's my daughter, my youngest child's 18th birthday, and yes, that sort of brings it home to you a little bit and makes you start thinking about all that type of thing. It doesn't matter how old you actually feel or how you feel in yourself, and when you're the wrong side of 50, as I am, things start aching a little bit, and all these start making noises when you move around, involuntary noises, not those sort of noises. Um, and you start to realise that you're not quite as young as you are, but you feel happy and you're going along quite alright. And I've never been particularly bothered about age. The fact that I'm in my 50s, or even when I got to 50, which is a big milestone and a millstone for a lot of people, but for me it didn't bother me. I felt in some ways a sense of freedom, maybe because you get over that sort of hurdle and you can sort of grow old disgracefully, as I try to do, rather than have to fulfil certain things that other people might feel that you should do because you're only in your 40s. But when your youngest child turns 18, it does bring it home to you a little bit and makes you start to think about things. Partly, one of the things that it made me think about, or has made me think about, is what was I doing when I was 18? What was I like when I was 18? Now, I was 18 way back in 1976, which is a year that's been talked about at the moment because of droughts, and we had a big drought and a wonderful summer back in 1976. So I was 18 then. I'd left school for 2 years. I'd been working for 2 years. I was still living at home. I was earning money. I didn't drive a car or anything like that. And I spent most of my time out buying music, listening to music, drinking beer and smoking cigarettes as well in those days. But I was also had a drum kit and I was playing music. I can't remember if I was actually doing any gigs at that time. I think it was in between bands, resting, I suppose, some people might call it. But I look back on those times, I can't remember a huge amount about it, although the fact I had long hair at that particular time. But it makes me think then, what is my daughter feeling like now? She's 18. Has she got those sort of same feelings that I had when I was back then, when this supposedly a whole life is ahead of you? But another thing that made me think about this is that the way that the world has changed. The world that I grew up in when I was 18, it's changed enormously now to her when she's 18. I was looking at something on the internet last night. I discovered what they called infographics, which are like infographics of different things, and something that the internet was designed for in some ways. They can put all this information into a big long stream of information and put graphics to it. It does what it says on the tin. But one of them was about Generation Z, as they call them. And these are people like my daughter, who was born obviously in 1994, who have grown up with the internet, the way that we use the internet now. Yes, the speeds have got better, but she probably only really remembers broadband. So I don't expect she remembers all them funny noises from the dial-up times. But she's got a laptop, she uses the internet all the time. She's got her BlackBerry, which is attached to her, or seems to be attached to her. I'm bad enough with my phone, but I'm probably a little bit more advanced in some ways technologically than other people of my own age, because I'm interested in it. I know plenty of other people who don't take it the same way and get involved in the same way, but I've got an interest in it. That makes a difference. For people of my daughter's age, or even my son, who's 21, obviously that little bit older, and who was born that little bit earlier, he's grown up in it as well, but he's not what they call a Generation Zer, as opposed to a baby boomer or Generation Y and all these sort of things that they've also come out with. My daughter's grown up with it, and her whole life will be lived with the internet, and that's a huge thing. Obviously, she knows no different. I do know the difference between what we used to have and what we do have now. Things move on, things change, obviously, but her life and what she's living now is a completely different world. I think even more so than when I grew up. Things have changed quite a lot, especially in the musical world, which I was interested in, but a lot of the other things were pretty recognisable to what my parents would have known. Yes, technology had moved on, but I think in those sort of 18, 20 years or whatever it is, well, actually it's a lot longer than that, but between 1976 and now is obviously more than the 18 years that my daughter's been alive. But things in that last 20 odd years, and especially with the rise of the internet, things have changed no end. I couldn't do this for a start. Couldn't have done this sort of 10 years ago for that matter. So, and things are moving along. Our world is completely different. Those handheld devices that I was talking about. And of course the other thing you start to think about is your memories of your daughter or your children generally, and it takes you back, to how 18 years ago. What was I like 18 years ago? We all worry about how our life's slipping us by. Would I want to go back to be 18 again is another point. Well, I'm not sure that I would now. I suppose it depends on what conditions you can do it, but you can't do it anyway, so it's a bit of a stupid question, isn't it, really? But we always think about it. Oh, wouldn't it be great to be back to be a teenager? I'm not so sure about that. In some ways, I don't envy them growing up in the way that life is. Some aspects are brilliant, but others aren't. Swings and roundabouts, I suppose. But also the memories of actually the children. It's one of those things that when I grew up, when I was 18, I could never have imagined having children of 21 and 18 myself. Furthest thing from my mind, as I'm sure it is for my daughter, hopefully, and also for my son. But the older you get, the more you think about it, I suppose. But all that it's brought to you, and I know people who haven't got children, and if you don't have children, that's fine. You live a completely different life. But I can't imagine life being like that now. I never, as I said, never would have thought about it in that way. And if I had have gone to get to the age that I am now, not had children, obviously my life would have been a completely different thing. But I'm sure I'd have been a completely different person as well. Not in any great philosophical way, but just having children, bringing them up, living with them, loving them, whatever. Makes you a different person. Maybe makes you think about things in a slightly different way, and even value things in a slightly different way as well. I like to think so. Another thing with my daughter especially was that when she was born, literally within a couple of months of her being born, she had a very, very serious heart condition, and she had a major heart operation when she was 6-7 weeks old up in London, and we lived in Guy's Hospital in London for basically a month or so, nearly 2 months, I think, myself, my wife and my son, very young at the time obviously as well. She literally died in hospital for about 15 minutes, and she was literally nursed back to life by a nurse who happened to be in the intensive care ward, literally holding and squeezing her heart. Now that makes you think about things in a different way because of the nature. Her chest was still open because she'd had major heart surgery anyway. So that makes you value things a little bit more, because we probably could never have imagined her as she was then, and the state of her life was in at that time, hanging by a thread, literally on one side to the other, and then coming out the other side and coming along now. She still has checkups and this type of thing. But then 18 years ago, you're thinking, what on earth is her life going to be like? Is she going to reach 18? And if she does, is she going to be hampered by what she's been through and some of the restrictions that it might bring on her life? It hasn't. Yes, there are certain things, but generally she's a happy, healthy 18-year-old, very thankfully, and with her whole life ahead of her. And it just makes you wonder. Now, I've lived majority, I think, of my life, I imagine so anyway, and she's got the majority of hers to come. And it's these sort of times that makes you sort of sit back and start thinking about that. My wife was even talking about mortality the other day because of memories of her mother who died 2 years ago last week, and she was only 70 years ago. 70 was quite an achievement to get to. Nowadays, so many people do it, so many people get to 100, but it does still make you wonder when people of my age, you get to my age now, people are dying around you, whether they be older than you or even your age or even younger, unfortunately, as well. And it does tend to make you start thinking about these things. Hopefully I haven't depressed you in any particular way, but I just felt I needed to make a video about this. You get to a certain stage in your life, things change, and things remind you of where you used to be, where you've come from, where you are, and maybe what's to come in the future. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for your time. I'll speak to you again soon. Goodbye.